I'd like to help you to understand the importance of having the right questions prepared for your interviewers during job interviews. Because what happens is most candidates assume that questions for them is a rubric of formality during the last 5 or 10 minutes of the conversation. When in fact, I recently had a candidate with a well-known company whose interview was the first half, with, hey, do you have any questions for me, or questions about the role, or questions about the company? And by the way, it was a 30-minute interview, out of which the first 15 minutes was questions for them. So basically my point here is that asking the right questions during job interviews is an interviewing technique and can mean the difference between success and failure. Now, right from the start, let's start with some easy topics here. No one is asking about vacation or directly asking about compensations when getting asked, hey, do you have any questions for me? People are a lot smarter these days. Candidates, the bar, so to speak, has been raised, so no one is asking outright dumb questions. But the difference is being made on whether you're asking smart questions out of which you get something, or you're asking them questions out of which you cannot really obtain much of a difference, right? So let's start with the less interesting types of questions you can ask your interviewers during your job interviews. And in my experience, this always boils down to questions about your interviewer, such as, why did you join the company? Or what do you like best about working in this role? The best you can do with these questions is to make them feel good, to ask them some easy questions they will enjoy answering. Will this play to your advantage when it comes to an outcome of this job interview? I doubt. By the way, you can ask them some slightly less comfortable questions, such as, what do you like the least about working here? Right? Which again, you would put them in a bit of difficulty, but it's a question about your interviewer. So at best, you would get a feeling about how is the culture there. But again, with respect to passing interviews and doing well in job interviews, there's no tangible outcome when asking these interview questions. Furthermore, there's another set of even more dangerous types of questions I recommend you stay away from unless you really know what you're doing. That is about your interview. So you see, at the end of your interview, you would ask the interviewer how your interview was. How do I stack up against other candidates? Or how do you think my interview went? Or how long do you think I should expect until I hear back from you with a decision with these things? Again, these are dangerous questions, and some people, you'll put some interviewers, especially inexperienced interviewers, in an uncomfortable spot, which basically you have nothing to win from putting your interviewers in an uncomfortable spot, because the return of your investment is minimal here. So then the question becomes, how do you get the best value by asking your interviewer the right questions during a job interview? From the start, I'd like to help you to understand a major reason candidates get rejected after final interview rounds is because they were not the best fit for the role. Okay, so basically the takeaway from this is you asking as early on in the process and as much as possible during the process to get an insider preview of what is this role all about will play to your advantage. So questions such as, is this a new or replacement role? If it's a replacement role, why did the other person leave? Okay, what went wrong there? Okay, because if that person was a low performer, there must have been some KPIs involved in his performance indicators, in their performance indicators, right? Similarly, any job in high-performing company will have a set of key competencies that they will be screening each and every candidate on, and they will use those core competencies to differentiate those candidates. Those core competencies will never, ever be shared with the candidate. Okay, so still you may ask, it's a perfectly valid question to ask, especially the hiring manager, What do you think are the core competencies or the key competencies required in ideal candidate for this role? How does success look like in this role? What KPIs are you using to measure success? Don't worry, the hiring manager will not spill the beans, will not give you exactly what they're looking for, but still they might get you a step closer towards understanding what the right fit for the role might look like. Not the ideal candidate, but still it would get you closer, and it will help you to prevent uncomfortable rejection reasons, such as you were maybe a bit hands-off for our preference, right? I often advise people to be upfront with their interviews, especially with the recruiters, as early on in the process. Is this a hands-on or a hands-off role? How senior is this role? What types of candidates do well in these types of jobs, right? So these are the types of questions that you should focus on to obtain the most benefit out of this rubric of questions for them. And again, as I said, it can interviewers and interviews with exceptionally high-performing companies are trending towards helping you, are trending towards screening you based on the questions you ask them, because if you ask yourself the right questions, it's also interpreted that you are quite likely to be a high performer in your role. Okay, especially for sales roles and people with great communication skills. But still, it can be a golden mine for you to consider if you want to obtain as much insight into the profiles that do well in their job interest. And last but not least, I want to talk about here about an important dynamic you also want to follow closely during your job interviews. The absolute best questions for them will often be a combination of what you prepare prior to your interview, even some questions especially for your interviewer for their role, but importantly also the other half of the for the mind mapping process for these questions would be the questions you're getting asked during a job interview, the conversation you have with your interviewer. Okay, because if you manage to combine a set of questions you prepare in advance with how the conversation evolves, then you will get the absolute best combination of what's the ideal question to ask. Because if you link that question to your interview, they will appreciate your your emotional intelligence, so to speak, your listening skills, and even your commercialism during this job interviews. You'll be surprised how many candidates don't understand the business that the job that they're applying for is in. For example, with a very large organization, many different departments, you would expect my role would be a boring role, a back-end developer for AWS. Well, in fact, at AWS, any role is a sales role. There's a famous saying over there, so showing a bit of commercialism is also something that will very likely pay to your advantage, again, in the context of trying to link your conversation with your interviewer with the questions you prepare, to get the most relevant question you can get for them, and why not to make it a memorable discussion, right? So I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.